thank you for your time, taking your
My
time
pleasure.
for my research.
Anytime.
As you know, my research is about local traditional knowledge in the rural areas of Morocco and about the projects of HAF or development projects, how they apply this knowledge, if they do, how much, how deeply. But first of all, I want to ask you some general questions, and then we come to the local knowledge and project planning.
Okay.
Okay. So, the first question is, since when are you working for HAF? But I know you founded the Atlas Foundation, so
Yeah.
maybe you can quickly say when
Yeah.
you started.
Well, we started in 2000, but the idea came in 1995 when I finished my Peace Corps service as a volunteer and didn't feel quite done. And I knew that I wanted to go to graduate school and do other things, and which I did do. And then after graduate school in 1998, I came back to Morocco to start the Atlas Foundation. And I didn't know its name back then, of course, but then I was hired as Associate Peace Corps Director, and that then took me to 2000, until finally, when I was back in the United States, I reached out to fellow former volunteers and staff and colleagues, and that's when we created it. But the idea was in my mind several years prior to that.
Okay, good. And before all of that, you went to school, right?
Yes, I went to New York University as an undergraduate, and then I went to Clark University as a graduate student in international development and social change. My undergraduate was in economics. But then in 2000, I enrolled at the University of New Mexico at the Department of Sociology, and that's when the Atlas Foundation began.
Okay, good.
As a student, and I say that oftentimes to students because sometimes we feel that we need to graduate before we begin our organization, or that we start our implementing our ideas only after we have our degree. But we need to start as soon as possible, even as a student, and that hopefully by the time we do graduate, that organization will have developed enough that we can concentrate on it full time, and maybe even it support us. So starting after we graduate may be late in many cases.
Okay, it's a good message for me personally.
Yeah, that the time is now, and there's no precondition to start the organization that we most want.
Yeah, okay. And I know you're the president of the Atlas Foundation, but what exactly is your field of operations? What are you?
Well, the president is the CEO, and so you're overlooking all aspects of the organization, the projects, the finances, the personnel, the policies, the partnerships, the resources, the strategic planning. You are the CEO. The president is also a board member. And so you are interacting with the board on a consistent, regular basis, and that's a hugely important function. But in my case, we do a lot of agricultural, health, educational projects, but my expertise is in sociology. And I'm sure that informs my approach as the head of the organization, in that I'm very focused on the human dimension, the inclusion, the participatory approach, the community ownership, that data and information that's generated in this process come from the people, for the people, as they decide their future course. So when we look at the founding of sociology, the promoting of the general welfare is part of the essence of sociology, and so in a way I am true to my discipline to my study in that I'm concentrating on making a difference. And I'll just say one thing in relation to that sociology is a study of our behavior as it is influenced by social forces, by gender, by religion, by ethnicity, by class, by levels of poverty or prosperity, and so forth. And so, of course, we're affected by a huge the full range of social forces. And so, and I think too, the participatory approach is considerate of all of those impacts on our lives. And so that extremely broad view that sociology takes, so too does the participatory approach take. And there's a congruence, or there's something that works very nicely between the two.
Okay. What is your motivation to work here, or what motivates you in your work?
What motivates me? There's of course, I'm trying, I guess my hesitation is that there's certainly answers that I've given and can give. And, what I typically say to that is there are two. One is when we hear the stories of the people for years of our lives, and we take them in and we realize the incredible difficulty in our lives, in people's lives, as they relate to not having clean water to drink, or not being able to provide most basic things for our children and our families and ourselves, and that solutions are so understandable, so clear and reachable and definable and really right in front of us, then it becomes very hard to, walk away from that. And so I'm moved to my core, and my heart is filled with the expressions and desires of Moroccan communities. And I am completely motivated and inspired by the possibilities of implementing the projects that they want. And that's hard to find an equal level of inspiration in other professions. The other side to that is Morocco wants people's participation in development. And so we're not fighting, the laws are behind us. Morocco has opened up opportunities for civil society. Morocco wants organic agriculture and local control and multiculturalism. Having said all that, Morocco is also struggling with implementing these progressive, thoughtful ideas and policies and laws, but they're there, and that creates another incredible opportunity. And so when you couple that very deep-seated needs that create real struggles in life and viable solutions, along with Morocco's context that allows for people to build their lives and make a difference and encourage that, then we're in a very special place. And so that all of that combined is what motivates me. But on the other side of that, though, is that we don't really, on a different level, does that explain why I've given 25 years of my energy and time and all of those things? I'm not. I know, but then we're getting to a level that even the person. I mean, what you think about this, and of course I'm not. But what compels? I was, I'm oftentimes, because I've been listening to so many speeches by Martin Luther King, his sermons, and his son, 7-year-old son, at one point came to him and said, "Daddy, why do you go to prison so many times. And, of course he believes to his core in what he's doing, but there's a level of energy and commitment that is so hard to define and explain. And, teachers have that, giving their entire lives to instructing and providing guidance for young people. And so many of us have that. And we can't always explain where that comes from. And so I'm not sure exactly what makes me do this after whatever. And we all go through trials. And what compelled me to continue through my own personal ones. I'm not sure. But I know that it's just the idea of, I'm not sure I could stop. I'm not sure I could just walk away. I don't think I can. I've tried. With family and all these things in life compel one to make a change sometimes. But it's just so hard to let go, and I can't necessarily explain why.
Okay. That's fine. Don't worry.
No. These are long answers.
Don't worry.
All right. Thank you.
And is the work you're doing here satisfying you? Do you like your work here?
On the whole, it's satisfying. I think that, for example, I left academia to join the High Atlas Foundation full-time in 2010, 2011, and I enjoyed, there was an element of teaching that I did enjoy, and so now we've always had that kind of learning experience in our workshops and so forth, but now we're teaching university courses or course starting this summer, and we've always had university partnerships. I guess what I'm saying is that those areas where I felt that I needed more satisfaction, because we deal with such because of the way we define our mission, we're able to grow in different ways. Writing, that if someone has a desire to analyze and research and write and get that into the public domain, there's space to do that at the High Atlas Foundation. But there are areas that I think are interesting that I can't do at the High Atlas Foundation, and that is not satisfying. And that is, for example, and I'm not, in a way, in the High Atlas Foundation, I'm not interested, and I don't want to do this, but it's very interesting when we look at the intersection between development and politics. We are non-political, we'll always be non-political, we don't think in terms of politics. I couldn't tell you the political parties of any government official that's been part of our training programs. I never considered to ask. It's irrelevant. And that's how we all think. At the same time, if I were doing this in the United States, my home country, it's just natural that when people create movements for development, that they may want to enter into local elections or use participatory methods as part of a political campaign. And so there are dimensions of participatory processes that by definition, we never will explore at the High Atlas Foundation, but I think on an intellectual level are very interesting. And so, we want to be able to pursue all of our innovation in our minds. And so there's certain innovations in mind that the High Atlas Foundation will not ever be a vehicle for. And so I wonder if down the road, 10, 20, 30 years, how will I feel when that particular example, and there are others, may not have been explored. Not the answer you expected. Maybe it was.
That's fine.
No, I know. But But again, I say these things not to ramble and rant, but just in a way, I'm saying it to you and to Musa and others in this room, but that because you're going into your futures and you're going to be, what job to go for, what profession to create, or what organization to create, and just realizing that we will never likely not have a single entity that directly meets all of the facets in our own personal lives and brings satisfaction to all of them.
Yeah.
I can't imagine the entity that could, bring completeness to all of that. And so maybe there is, but I haven't found one in my life. And so I imagine that's more the common than the exception. So therefore, we need to have different aspects, things going on to bring the full gamut of fulfillment that we need.
Okay. Thank you for this.
All right.
Now, I would like to come to the next topic.
Okay.
Which is the local knowledge and the project planning. And you personally, how would you define local or traditional knowledge? Can you give some examples? What does it mean? Or what is it?
In a non-sector sense, of course, it manifests in health and how communities resolve conflict and how they plan, and in agriculture and in gender relationships. So it manifests in all areas of life. But if we were to step back of how it occurs, we would consider local traditional knowledge to be that which is an extension of identity, that is carried down through generations and centuries, oftentimes orally, and that it's associated with the goal, the purpose, the mission of continuity and survival. So Morocco is incredibly, like all places probably on earth. I mean, what human society, community, group, civilization doesn't have that? We all have that. How do we, it's the carrying forward of information to inform and guide and sustain our continuity so that we endure as a human people, but doing it in a way to preserve ourselves as a family, as a village, as a culture. And everyone has their, and that there are endless, countless streams of this.
Is there any specific example you could give?
Well, so there are, yes. In the Moroccan case, or in my personal identity case, or in the Moroccan case. One that immediately comes to mind is how we irrigate in Morocco, the irrigation system, and the complexity and the simplicity and the efficiency and the productivity of how it's organized. It's how, and the way that it's shared, and which relates to the organization. Here's another one that I'm often struck by. There was a border dispute. There was a border conflict on a communal level between literally the north and south side of the High Atlas which currently has the border between the El Haus and Teredin provinces, but it's also obviously a municipal border, a communal border. And it's a complicated border because you have the tallest peaks in North Africa there. And about 80, 90 years ago, before there were, say, there were less formal administrative processes of how to resolve such disputes. It had to be resolved from commune to commune. And so what did they do? How did they resolve it? They had someone on the north side begin to walk toward the border, and someone on the south side begin to walk toward the border at a specific time, and where they met became the accepted boundary. Yeah. And so that's a traditional way of resolving a border dispute. And those disputes are very important to resolve because, of course, we're talking about not just farming communities, but also communities that rely upon grazing animals. And so when you're talking about the high Atlas Mountains, that's particularly at high elevation, that's their summer grazing land. And so where that border settles is hugely necessary that they determine. And the fact that they both accepted this method, which I am sure is not which is not the first time it's been applied, but carried down, is actually a peacemaking approach, and gets to that original definition I said. It's about preservation. It's about solidarity, resolution in this case, and so.
So this kind of conflict-solving method is applied to other in other cases.
It's been applied in other cases. I mean, when you mentioned also, there are other conflict resolution approaches that are, and there are others that I've observed or learned about that occur in traditional areas, but that's one that struck me.
Okay, thank you. And which role does this local traditional knowledge you just described in your descriptions of your own definition play in the project planning of the High Foundations project?
That's a key. In a way, everything, because when we engage a community, when we're invited to engage a community in a development process, we have no predetermined project type, whether in agriculture, health, education, benefiting youth, empowering women, focusing on girls' education, whatever it may be. These are all important things, and we're dedicated to all of them. But clean drinking water, but what emerges to the top and what we focus on comes from the people's own consensus building, analyzing, data gathering, conflict resolving process. And that what forms is a definition of projects that they are committed to and what they most want, and then therefore we are committed to. And so a natural part of that experience is that it injects traditional knowledge, information, perspectives, needs into it. And so it's throughout, it's the foundation of development, sustainability. It's really in everything, especially even too. So when we're talking about water, because water does emerge, the way of sharing water. It touches upon irrigation, but also on clean drinking water. That whole arrangement, when it's designed by the community beneficiaries, that's also going to be informed by the proven centuries-old way of sharing, distributing, organizing around water.
Is there another example you could give, like a specific case or specific example of a type of traditional knowledge which was inspired to a project?
The medicinal plants, that's a very big one. There's a province in the Oujda region called Jarada, and it has a highly important, significant level of the wild herb cumin, kamun bilarabia, and it's also a staple. That wild plant is a staple for the grazing animals, and so the province relies heavily on that. And with time and with partnership with the Waters and Forests, which ultimately oversees that public domain of land, that traditional herb and how it's picked and processed and collected and dried and handled is also, when we look at global prices of cumin, it's also highly viable. So what we're seeing in Morocco, and this is really where I was thinking about your question, is that traditional knowledge and practices and product is also becoming to be more and more rewarded by the market. And so that and how it's, and the fact that it is picked and dried by women too, and so that also is an area, that traditional gender form of production is actually also now interesting and rewardable in the marketplace. So
what does the Heartless Foundation do with the herbs, the traditional cumin in the Oujda region?
Well, there are two things. One is that we purchased samples. We purchased samples and then gave them to potential buyers in the U.S. But the other thing is that right now the area that they can harvest is not going to create a prosperous economic outburst. That area has to be vastly expanded. So we are working with the Department of Waters and Forests so that they are able to provide a greater allowance of land access to these cooperatives.
Did the cooperatives exist before?
There are a number of them, and I think probably over the course of 1 year, this is a project that was funded by the Middle East Partnership Initiative that enabled the Heartless Foundation to engage 82 cooperatives in the Oujda region. And there are, I believe, 7 provinces in Oujda, and Jarada is just one. And so there are multiple cooperatives that deal with cumin, and there are some are going through that registering process. One has already the food certification by the food inspectors to be able to reach larger markets, larger domestic markets, and international. So there's a range of levels of growth among the cooperatives dedicated to cumin in the Oujda region.
Because of how?
So, yeah, I mean, yes. Now the project it has just concluded with MEPI. Literally, we're still closing out. I mean, as we speak, it's ending. It's ending, and so so now we have been, and we still are working with our Oujda team there to see how can we maintain, because look, I mean, 1 year is just, developing statutes for their organization, decision-making workshops, all of these things to get to the point where they're now exporting product. And that takes 3 years. That took us 3 years. Now, we had 1 year in Ujda, and so it's a work in progress.
Yeah, sure. It's a long process.
It is a longer process. And even in the examples where I could tell you where we've taken it to a point of successful export, it's still not over. Okay. In terms of our support, because new product come up, and new technical building and skills is always necessary, and so conflicts occur between them still, and they needing external facilitation, and so our role evolves and changes over the course of those 3 years. We're not doing now the things that with them that we've done before, and so that's very positive. But to completely detach is probably within a year or two. When we can really just sort of sit back. But now we've already, so they've gone on to larger nurseries and plots of land, and the earlier ones of areas, now there are other women's groups that haven't gone through this that want to. And so now we're starting, you repeat the process with other neighboring, in this case, other neighboring women's village groups that, and so the story continues one way or another.
Yeah, that's good, yeah. Maybe this is very obvious, but could the involvement of local knowledge in project planning lead to the sustainability of projects?
And I'm not sure how else we can achieve sustainability. There's no one thing, say, sustainability is entirely based upon local knowledge and perspective and priorities and needs and how the ultimate beneficiaries define them and control them and manage them and evaluate them. Yes, it is a without which. But there's other without whiches. I mean, it's finance and provincial, domestic, international partnerships. There are other elements that need to be part of a project in order for that project to endure and have success. But without that local input of energy and information and knowledge and tradition and all of those things, there would be no reason or will or interest for the communities to maintain that project. So evaluations have shown that traditional knowledge that you're calling, or that we would call community determination, which does have an element of traditional knowledge to it, that's at least as important as finance. That's what evaluations show, at least or more important. So you get a sense of it's central to the equation as finance is central, and finance is also synonymous with partnership. So.
And maybe more specifically, what's the connection between the sustainability and the consideration of local knowledge? I mean, in specific, the local traditional knowledge, what does it do? What's the connection?
And yes, specifically, but let's just, and yes, there are very specific, but let's also take a moment to say this, that the incorporation of communities into the control management of development and their points of view as it relates to traditional knowledge and information that they have, by incorporating that, there is an acknowledgement, number one. And that's really, really important. That your information and your point of view and how you view your past and your history and your skills and outlook, that's important.
Yeah.
You know, that, and not only important, but it's critical.
Yeah.
And we're going to base change on that. And so you ask the question, what is the specific connection between local knowledge and sustainability? That affirmation, that acknowledgement and recognition it has to be there to give people the motivation to carry on.
Okay, yeah.
So that's number one. But then, you know, broadly speaking, and by the way, that recognition and acknowledgement is also a key part of reconciliation. When we're talking about ethnic reconciliation, when there are groups in conflict, different ethnic groups, you know, racial groups, so much of that, you know, resolving of difference begins with sharing stories and acknowledging each other's experiences. You know, what happened as a person of color, as you know, as whatever identity we carry, and how difficulties in life were put upon us because of that ethnic identity. What does that feel like, and what were they, and how has that formed your existence in this world? And then for that other parties to say, you know, I hear you, and I acknowledge what you're saying, and maybe even leading to an apology. So, you know, that part of resolution and peacemaking, when you bring that into your question of acknowledgement, it's really emotional and key. And so many times we hear that people in development world come and they don't ask, and they don't listen, and they don't stay, and they don't want to know, and they predetermine, you know, Highlands Mountains, it has to be tourism projects. In all of our years, in all the community meetings over decades, I've never seen a village prioritize tourism.
Yeah.
You know, no, and there are reasons for that.
Yeah.
It's hard to create shared wide benefit from a tourism project. And tourists may stop in 1 out of 10 villages, and if they stop in that village, they may benefit 2 or 3 households. And so, of course, clean drinking water is going to be more important than that. That benefits everyone. Or an irrigation canal, or bathrooms in schools, or, you know, but so many times outsiders, you know, we assume what the project will be. And so when we base it the other way around, the trust key. Why would I trust when I don't see myself and my outlook into the design of projects? We need to see our own reflection in the change that we commit to. And if it doesn't reflect me and my family and my needs and my community, then we're not going to extend the time and energy. So acknowledge me and how I feel, and that's really that's you know, moving forward. And then it manifests in very key ways. Like, for example, there's communities that experience shortage of water, particularly in summer months. The ideal time to pick fruit could be in August, but they're picking it in May. When it's smaller, you're getting less per kilo, you know, less kilos per tree. It's not ideal, but if they were to keep it on the tree, it wouldn't survive the summer. And so, you know, what harvesting is injected constantly with local experience and knowledge. When to harvest. and when to sell, when to keep stock, when to release into the market. You know, all of these things, in a way, lend toward survival. At the same time, so there's that. You know, and local knowledge lending towards sustainability. You know, in very practical ways, in that agricultural way, in consideration of water. At the same time, those traditional forms of selling your harvest have to be undone or redone or changed or evolved if communities are going to reach the most lucrative markets. If their product is going to be certified by the food inspectors or certified organic or processed, or, you know, as they grow from traditional knowledge and traditional harvesting and traditional relationships of buying and selling, which, you know, clearly we need to totally respect, because it enabled people to exist and endure over so long, and from generation to generation and all those things. At the same time, one could argue that, not that it's keeping him down, but you know, when global prices of walnuts double over the past 10, 12 years, and farmers are receiving relatively the same amount, then, and 75, 80% of them are experiencing poverty, then something's got to change. And they need to be able to produce more, harvest differently, certify, transport, you know, process, commercialize, if they're going to get out of this. And so, you know, that's why there's the whole modernizationist point of view, the original perspective that informed development leading up to and after World War II, doesn't look favorably upon your thesis, which is local knowledge and tradition, because, you know, it's not meeting needs, and it's naturally going to fall by the wayside as we develop as a society, just as it's fallen by the wayside in Germany and in the United States and in industrialized nations. So will it do the same in Morocco and other parts of the developing world. But we've learned a lot since then, how to appreciate local knowledge and how to make it useful and incorporated in a economic growth era, globalized era that we're in. So we can have our cake and eat it too, but we can't forget that it has to evolve and change, and that it's going to hurt people by doing that. Those local ways of trading, when you change that, there will be people, at least in the interim phases, that are negatively affected. And so part of what we think about is, how do we offset that? You know, as we utilize local knowledge but grow in a way that detach those traditional ways of selling product and it goes in another direction, how do those local purchasers and intermediaries, how do they sustain themselves? So they're, you know, it's complicated.
Yeah. It's complicated.
Yeah. But you know, but people are aware of it. I can go on. There's another example. You know, when we're talking about free trade, and Morocco has entered into free trade agreement with the United States and, you know, and European countries. Anyway, I don't know if you want to get into that, but it's disruptive. It's you know, it's not one thing or another. And one of the things that Morocco built into its free trade is that it's given a period where free trade is more concentrated on industrialized product than it is on farm product. And that's because, in the case of the United States and Mexico, under that free trade, how can the Mexican farmer compete with you growing corn, compete with U.S. corn at the efficiency and productivity level and as compared? And so it had a hugely dislocating effect on Mexican growers. Unrest, urban migration, collapse in the price of land, collapse in the price of the value of their product, an enormous hardship. And so Morocco looked at that, and so did the rest of the world, and say, okay to free trade, but we're not going to open up our rural economy to compete with yours, in the United States, because we don't want to suffer the same consequence. So, to give Moroccan farmers the time to develop its rural economy, and so that is going to have a huge effect on traditional forms of exchange and knowledge and practice and organization. And the thing about it is that it's taken Morocco a lot more longer than it anticipated when it signed that free trade agreement in 2004. It was hoping 10, 15 years to get to be beyond where the rural economy could grow and potentially open up and compete with the U.S. But, that's not the case.
No, okay.
Sorry. I feel like I'm going on, Elias.
Don't be sorry. Final question.
Oh, wow.
Yeah? Okay. If you would do a statement for the head of foundation on the topic of traditional knowledge, which significance, meaningfulness, importance does House give to this topic?
I think the way that we consider Moroccan traditional knowledge is at the core of the foundation's experience in this country. We are in the position of being not just wanted and trusted and welcomed and I don't want to say relied upon, but integral with so many communities because of our approach, which is based upon their knowledge. But we're also set free and encouraged and supported by the government. Because the government too is proud, rooted in Moroccan identity and history. And when an organization, particularly an international one, yes, we are Moroccan, we're registered in Morocco, we are Moroccan, but we're also international. And when an international organization takes the Moroccan approach and bases itself on Moroccan dimensions, then they too are going to give you the authorizations that you need to function. They're going to give you support and land and partnership agreements and frameworks to operate, and what they can enable to allow this organization to go forward, they do. So, when you ask the question, what does ultimately local knowledge mean to the foundation, or how does it inform it? It's really inseparable to, it is the foundation. The foundation doesn't exist without local knowledge. It is the basis, and partners won't want to partner with us unless we were that way. So many partners come to us and say, we've had partners that said, here's $100,000. Take what you need to find out what the people want and spend the rest on what the people want. There's the OMCUS, the Organization of Moroccan Community in the United States, Siemens, which was, they had a sense of water or energy, but they wanted to know what people in the Moroccan Sahara, the Western Sahara wanted. And we had spent an entire year just doing that assessment. There's another partner down in that same region that gave the foundation a pot of money to spend that assessment year, and in that case we moved it into clean drinking water for 7 schools, an energy company. And I think too, our partnership with all of them are National Endowment for Democracy for so many years are about democracy. They want to assist the growth of civil society in the way that the civil society wants to grow, build their capacity so that they could pursue their mission. I think all of our partners to some degree come to us because of that. So not only is it and there's really nothing else in our mission when you look about it. I mean, we may use different terms, but when you're saying participation of the people to drive development, and that's our approach to sustainability, what we're saying is that the tradition and outlooks and ways and manners and behavior and identity and point of view and the all dimensions of the Moroccan people is what comes into our planning and design of development, and then therein we achieve sustainability. You don't find agriculture and health in our mission. That's our mission. And that's our path to the future. And that's why people want to work with us. And so, but back to the point earlier, change on some level is disruptive. The foundation has planted some millions of trees. It's creating huge amount of revenue and product and movement, and it's increasing the value of land. Now, what happens to that farmer who's been renting land for $30 a year, but now the owner of that land, realizing that if he or she, unfortunately usually he, were to plant and certify organic that land, that person can earn far more than what that earlier farmer was renting for. But then what does that earlier farmer do when he can no longer afford to rent that land? So we have to plant trees. We have to do all of these things, and they're all good, but at the same time, it's disruptive to someone along the way. We need to sell beyond the local market. That's going to be disruptive to someone. And so, it is the core of what we do. It always will be. As president and founder, you want to also ensure that it always will be. And so recently, as a board, we focused on what to embed and how to embed in our bylaws or in our statutes or in our core documents to ensure that this doesn't change. And that our methodology and how it evolves and grows is always intended to get to that traditional community point of view. If the foundation were to exist in another 50 years, what can we do today to ensure that this core principle remains true? So, that's how much we're committed to it. But at the same time, we need to be committed to the fallouts and to create a dynamic, multi-dimensional approach so that those who are dislocated along the way have recourses and options and other opportunities. And that takes another level of investment and creativity and strategy and thought and effort and all those things. So, I don't want to say that it is the end-all be-all. It is on a certain level, but there's an Achilles heel. There's an imperfection. And thankfully we're aware of it, and we're also dedicated to alleviating that as well.
Thank you very much, Yossef.
Thank you, and I appreciate it too. And it says a lot about you to pick this topic, because it's a brave one. It's an underappreciated one. You've presented it in a way that is in itself acknowledging to the people. There are.
What do you mean?
Well, because if Moroccan communities were to hear your thesis and your questions, they'd be applauding right now. They'd be standing up and cheering because they are affirming of the very thing that you're asking about. So that's very positive.
Very nice to know.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. And that doesn't surprise me. Does it surprise you about Celina? No? No? It's not surprising, is it? That she's on the side of the people.
That's my vision.
Yeah. Well, why don't we ask her a question, or should we just let this go? Why don't you answer all those questions? Well, let's ask this. What made you pick this topic?
What made me pick this topic? That's a tough question. Let me think. I was always interested in development, sustainable development. But I realized that development went very wrong in the past few years. So I think there's an approach going on in this year's changing the methods, which I really think it's very nice. And I realized during my research that also because of anthropology, anthropology is always with the people and wanting to know what the people think, what the people do, and I realized that this seems very important, the local knowledge of the people, what the people think, what the people want for the sustainability of development projects.
Yeah.
And I found out, I think I could already say, I found out it's true, what I found in the beginning here.
Yeah. When I think, it occurred to me a question to ask you, and just a background. When I started when I was 24 years old, I didn't know what you just said. That we need local knowledge in order to advance sustainability. And to the point when I was already in a village in the high Atlas Mountains and a Peace Corps volunteer, I thought that I had to come up with projects. And then you learn that that's not the case. It even got to the point where, when the community did sit to have a project, and explain a project, I thought that I wasn't doing my job even. I was so misunderstanding of things. and then you make mistakes, and then you go to you study, go into graduate school, and the Clark University International Development and Social Change focuses on the participatory approach. It has a particular group of methods that it championed because of its influential its professors. And so I guess what I'm asking you, so for me, I was already in the field not knowing this, and then with time, experience, and education, I learned it. And by the time perhaps I was 25, 26, I was on my way. How, in your life, did you get to a point where you understood that local knowledge and community involvement was a critical element of sustainability?
With my studies of anthropology, I would say. Yeah, that's the main point I've learned of the studies.
Good choice.
Yeah, I'm
Yeah.
very glad that I chose.
Yeah, you know, I think I should have.
Yeah.
I should have. I remember sitting in an intro to anthropology course and then dropping it. Perhaps I acted too soon. But I've come to appreciate anthropology and women's studies and public health and other disciplines that, take that point of view. Rather than economics, which is what I was in, which is highly quantitative and removed, and even sociology is not as strong. Yeah, it's not as with it as anthropology in that way. This particular theme of local knowledge and sustainable development and how they relate, what do they say?
I think if you're not really into the topic, and if you haven't read a lot about it, it's a bit hard to grasp. But on the human scale of this topic, they understand it totally because it's a human understanding of development.
Yeah, it's also biblical. There are examples in the story of creation of this very thing. That's why I think if it's in the story of creation, that suggests that it's part of natural law. And it's in the story of creation in this way. On the sixth day, God said, "Let us make man, make people. Let us." And of course, God is one, and there are no us. And so what was God referring to when he said us? Well, according to the Midrash, which is the oral commentary, which was once the oral commentary of the original scripture, Torah itself, which was then committed to writing a couple thousand years ago. But according to the Midrash, us referred to God was speaking to the angels, so that if the angels are included in the decision to make people, there won't be conflict between them. And the next sentence says, "And God created man." So the angels didn't. So the angels didn't create man. It was God created man, as it says in the following sentence. But in the lead up to creating man, God said, "Let us create man," to incorporate the angels as part of the decision, and thereby they accept the outcome of that decision.
Yeah.
So God even was participatory. Yeah. And there are there's another example of sustainability in the Torah on that deep, deep fundamental level. In the Torah, there are 613 commandments. There are 10 commandments. The 10 can be seen as categories within which the 613 fit. 613 basically do's and don'ts. And in only 2 places in the Torah, and these 613 relate to all aspects of life, all dimensions, every area, the entirety of living. Okay. Now, I guess as I'm saying this to you, I'm taking the point of view of the Torah. I'm not taking, I'm trying to explain it as they explain themselves. All right. Now, there are only 2 places in the Torah among these 613 where the Torah says the reward. And supposedly, the 2 places are what are considered the most important among the 613, which is to bury the dead, and the least important among the 613, which is to shoo away a bird before one takes its eggs to eat, so that you have mercy on the bird in that moment when its eggs are being taken. Now, the reward for both of those places, both of those dues, the reward is the same. What is the reward? Long life. That if we do these things, we will have long life. Which is to say that if we incorporate the 613 do's and don'ts in our lives that touch upon every aspect of our living, the reward of that will be long life. And so too in participatory development for sustainability, which touches upon, there's a cultural perspective, political, technical, historic, geographic, environmental, economic, social, political. Every dimension of society is considered in the design of development when you use a genuine participatory approach. And the reward of that inclusion of all perspectives is sustainability, or enduring, or longevity. Yeah. And so in that way too, the Torah captures the essence and approach to long life in this world. If we live in a way that is considerate and consistent with, as the Torah suggests, in all areas of living, we will live long. And so too, in regards to what we plan. If we plan in a way that incorporates all possible dimensions that inform that design or project, if we look at it from all points of view and design it accordingly, and we meaning the real collective we, then so too will that project continue long.